Lonely rancher Weds' fat young widow for a bet. On their first night, she shocked him. The poker chips clattered across the table as Jack Morrison slammed his cards down. His ranch hands erupted in laughter around him, whiskey glasses raised in the dim saloon light. The bet was simple and cruel. Marry the widow Henderson within a week, or lose his prize stallion to Pete Hannigan, the most despised man in 3 counties. Clara Henderson wasn't just any widow. She was young, maybe 25, with a roundness to her figure that drew mockery from the town gossips. Her husband had died 6 months prior, leaving her with a small homestead she could barely maintain. The whole town whispered about her weight, her loneliness, her desperate situation. Jack had seen her twice in town, noticed how she kept her eyes down, how she moved quickly to avoid conversation. Now he rode toward her property with a churning stomach. The morning sun beat down on his shoulders as dust kicked up from his horse's hooves. He wasn't proud of what he was doing. 42 years old, alone, on a sprawling ranch with nobody to share it with, and here he was, treating marriage like a card game. His mama would have slapped him senseless. Clara's homestead appeared over the ridge, small, weathered, but maintained with obvious care. Chickens scattered as he approached. She emerged from the barn carrying a bucket of feed, her dress plain and practical. When she saw him, she froze. Jack dismounted, hat in hand. His rehearsed words died in his throat when he met her eyes. They were sharp, intelligent, carrying none of the defeat he'd expected. She set down the bucket slowly. "Mr. Morrison," she said. Her voice was steady. "You're far from your land?" "Miss Henderson." "Ma'am, I have a proposition." She crossed her arms. "I've heard about your bet, Mr. Morrison." "The whole town's heard." Pete Hannigan made sure of that. Heat rushed to Jack's face. "Ma'am, let me save you the embarrassment," she interrupted. "I'll marry you." Jack's mouth opened, but no sound came. She stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "I need protection. My land needs a man's name on the deed or the bank takes it next month. You need to win your stupid bet." "We both get something." She paused. "But hear me clearly. You will treat me with respect. You will never raise a hand to me, and you will never, ever tell me what I can or cannot eat." The last part caught him off guard. There was fire in her words, a warning that spoke of past pain. "I would never," he started. "Men say lots of things," she cut him off. 3 days. We marry in 3 days. Bring a preacher to your ranch. I'll bring my belongings." She picked up her bucket. "Now leave. I have work to finish." Jack stood there, feeling like he'd just been trampled. This wasn't how he'd imagined it going. He'd expected tears, maybe gratitude, perhaps even refusal. Not this controlled fury, this woman who negotiated terms like a business contract. He rode back slowly, his mind spinning. Pete would lose the bet. The ranch hands would have their laugh. But something told Jack he'd just made a deal with consequences he couldn't foresee. The wedding took place in Jack's ranch house parlor with exactly 4 witnesses. The preacher, old Reverend Davies, rushed through the ceremony like he was afraid someone would stop him. Pete Hannigan stood in the corner with crossed arms and a scowl that could curdle milk. Jack's foreman, Carlos Rivera, served as witness alongside the preacher's wife. Clara arrived in a simple dress, her hair pulled back neatly. She carried 1 trunk and a carpet bag. No family accompanied her. Jack learned later both her parents had passed years ago, and her late husband's family had cut her off completely after his death. She stood straight during the vows, her voice clear and firm. Jack stumbled over his words twice. When Reverend Davies pronounced them married, Clara didn't wait for a kiss. She turned immediately to Pete Hannigan. "You've lost your bet, Mr. Hannigan. I suggest you leave now." Pete's face went purple. "This ain't over, Morrison. A deal made in mockery won't stand." "The deal was marriage," Clara said coldly. "Not love, not happiness. Marriage. We're married. You lost. Leave." The authority in her voice shocked everyone. Pete stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Carlos excused himself quickly, followed by the preacher and his wife. Suddenly, Jack and Clara stood alone in the parlor, the afternoon sun slanting through the curtains. "I'll show you to your room," Jack said awkwardly. "Our room," Clara corrected. "The hands will talk if we sleep separately. I won't have them thinking this marriage is false. It needs to appear real." Jack's throat went dry. "Ma'am, I didn't expect—" "I'm not offering affection, Mr. Morrison. I'm offering practicality. You have a large bed, I assume. I'll sleep on one side, you on the other. We maintain appearances." She picked up her trunk. "Where is it?" He led her upstairs in silence. The master bedroom was spacious, dominated by a large oak bed his grandfather had built. Clara set her trunk down and surveyed the room with a critical eye. This will do. I'll need space in the wardrobe. She began unpacking immediately, her movements efficient and practiced. Jack watched, feeling like a stranger in his own room. I should tell you about the ranch. We run cattle, about 200 head. Got 5 hands, including Carlos. They're good men, but they'll test you. Ranch life is hard. I've worked a homestead alone for 6 months, Mr. Morrison. I know about hard work. She hung a dress in the wardrobe. What I don't know is why a man with your means would risk his best horse on such a foolish bet. The question hung in the air. Jack sat heavily on the edge of the bed. Pride, stupidity. Pete said no woman would have me. Not at my age. Not with my temperament. Said I'd die alone. The whiskey made it seem like a good idea to prove him wrong. So you chose the desperate widow everyone mocks. Clara's voice was flat. Very heroic. I'm not proud of it. Good. You shouldn't be. She closed the wardrobe and turned to face him fully. But we're here now. I suggest we make the best of it. She began removing pins from her hair. It fell in dark waves past her shoulders, longer than Jack had realized. She moved to the mirror and started brushing it with practiced strokes. Jack found himself staring. You can change for bed, she said, catching his eye in the mirror. I won't look. He changed quickly, acutely aware of every sound. When he climbed into bed, Clara was already on the far side, her back to him, still fully dressed in her nightgown. The space between them felt like a canyon. Mr. Morrison, she said into the darkness. Jack, you can call me Jack. I need to tell you something. She rolled over to face him, though the darkness made her features unclear. My husband, Martin, he didn't die from the influenza like everyone thinks. Jack's heart began to pound. What do you mean? He died from infection, from wounds he gave himself trying to escape. She paused. From the cellar where he locked me for 3 days when I gained weight after losing our baby. The words hit Jack like a physical blow. He sat up abruptly. Sweet Jesus. He was ashamed of me. Said I was disgusting, that I ate like a pig. He'd control my food, measure portions, lock me away when I disobeyed. Her voice remained steady, but Jack could hear the tremor underneath. When I got out, I hit him with a shovel. Not hard enough to kill him, just enough to stop him. But he fell badly, cut himself on the cellar stairs. The wound got infected. He refused the doctor out of pride. 2 weeks later, he was dead. Jack's mind raced. Did anyone? No one knows. The doctor saw the infection, assumed an accident. I never corrected him. She sat up now too, facing him in the darkness. I'm telling you because you need to understand. I will never be controlled again. I will never be locked up. I will never be told I'm disgusting or worthless or too fat to be loved. If you try any of that, I will leave and I will take everything I can carry. I would never, Jack said, his voice rough with emotion. Clara, I may be a fool, but I'm not a monster. What he did to you, that's evil. Pure evil. Men say lots of things before they show their true nature. Then watch me. Judge me by my actions. Jack reached toward her in the darkness, then stopped. May I take your hand? A pause. Then her hand found his. It was work-roughened, strong. You're different than I expected, she said quietly. So are you. Jack squeezed her hand gently. I thought you'd be broken. Desperate. You're neither. I'm surviving. There's a difference. She didn't pull her hand away. Jack, I need to know. Why did Pete Hannigan hate you enough to make that bet? Jack sighed. 10 years ago, his father tried to buy my ranch. I refused. He kept raising the offer, getting more aggressive, finally tried to intimidate me, sent men to start fires, kill cattle. I gathered evidence, brought in the marshal. Old man Hannigan went to prison, died there 2 years later. Pete blames me for killing his father. Did you know he'd make that bet? No, but I walked right into it anyway. Jack shook his head in the darkness. Clara, I know this isn't the marriage either of us wanted, but I swear to you, I'll be a decent husband. You'll never want for anything. You'll never be hurt in this house. Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then she squeezed his hand back. We'll see, Jack Morrison. We'll see. They lay back down, hands still clasped between them. Outside, an owl called. Cattle lowed in the distance. The ranch settled into its night rhythms, and, in the darkness, 2 wounded people began the slow, uncertain process of learning to trust. The morning sun woke Jack before dawn, as always. He started to rise, then remembered Clara. She was still asleep, her face peaceful in the early light. He dressed quietly and slipped downstairs to start coffee, a task usually left to Carlos. She found him 20 minutes later, already dressed and purposeful. "Show me the kitchen properly. I need to understand what we have." The next 2 hours changed everything Jack thought he knew about his household. Clara moved through the kitchen like a general inspecting troops, opening cupboards, checking supplies, making lists. She questioned everything. "Why is your flour stored in the damp pantry? It'll go rancid. Who does the shopping? These prices are robbery. You're being cheated. Where's your herb garden? Don't tell me you buy dried herbs at those rates." Jack followed her, answering questions, feeling increasingly foolish. He'd run this ranch for 15 years and never questioned how things worked in the house. Carlos's wife had cooked until she passed 3 years ago. Since then, the hands took turns making basic meals. "It showed. This ends today," Clara announced. "I'll handle all household accounts. You're losing money on waste alone." When the ranch hands gathered for breakfast, they found a spread unlike anything they'd seen in years. Fresh biscuits, real gravy, eggs cooked properly, bacon that wasn't burned. The men sat down slowly, eyeing Clara with uncertainty. "Gentlemen," she said calmly, "I'm Mrs. Morrison now. I run this house. You will treat me with respect and I will make sure you eat properly. Questions?" Young Danny Cooper opened his mouth, caught Carlos's warning glare, and shut it again. The men ate in silence, but Jack saw the glances they exchanged, some skeptical, some curious, one or two openly hostile. Pete Hannigan's influence ran deep in the county. After breakfast, Carlos pulled Jack aside. "Boss, there's talk in town. Pete's saying the marriage is a sham, says he's going to prove it, get the bet overturned." "How's he planning that?" "Don't know. But he's been drinking heavy and making threats. Watch your back." Jack found Clara in the garden plot behind the house, already digging. She'd changed into practical clothes, her sleeves rolled up, sweat beaded on her forehead despite the morning cool. "You don't have to do this," Jack said. We can hire help. I like working with my hands. It clears my head. Besides, this soil is good. Waste to leave it empty. Pete's making trouble." "Of course he is. Men like him always do." She paused, leaning on the shovel. "Jack, I need to know something. If he comes here, if he tries to hurt me to get at you, will you protect me? With my life. I don't need dying heroes. I need someone who'll be smart about it." She met his eyes. "Promise me you won't do anything stupid for pride. That's asking a lot from a man who married you on a bet." A smile flickered across her face. It transformed her, made her younger, softer. "Fair point. But I'm serious, Jack. Pride gets people killed. Martin died from infected pride. Don't follow his path." The afternoon brought visitors. 3 ranch wives arrived in a wagon, ostensibly to welcome Clara. Jack recognized them immediately as the town's worst gossips. He watched from the porch as they descended on his wife like vultures on carrion. An hour later they left with stiff backs and tight faces. Clara came to sit beside him on the porch steps. "That went well," she said dryly. "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That we're married, it's legal, and my personal life is none of their concern." Margaret Preston tried to ask about our sleeping arrangements. I told her to focus on her own bedroom and leave mine alone. Jack laughed despite himself. "You just made enemies of the most influential women in the county. They were never going to be my friends, Jack. They came to judge me, to gather gossip for their tea parties." At least now they'll have accurate gossip." She stood, stretching her back. "Besides, I don't need friends who mock people for their weight or their circumstances. I need allies who respect strength." That evening they established a routine. Clara cooked while Jack handled the evening cattle check. They ate together, talking about the ranch, the plans, the necessary repairs. It was comfortable, almost normal. When they retired to bed, they maintained their separate sides, but the canyon between them felt smaller. 3 days into the marriage, everything changed. Jack was in the barn repairing a stall door when Danny Cooper ran in, breathless. "Boss, riders coming. At least 6 of them. Pete Hannigan's leading." Jack's blood went cold. He grabbed his rifle and headed for the house. Carlos and the other hands were already gathering, armed and ready. Clara met him at the door. "Get inside," Jack said. "No, this concerns me too. Clara, please. I'm your wife. I stand beside you, not behind you." Her jaw was set. "Besides, I have a feeling Pete's show is for my benefit. The riders came fast, pulling up in a cloud of dust. Pete dismounted with theatrical flair, 5 rough-looking men backing him up. Jack recognized 2 as known troublemakers, men who'd do anything for money. "Morrison," Pete called out, "we're here to contest your sham marriage. It's legal and recorded. You lost the bet. A bet made under false pretenses." Pete smiled cruelly. "See, I've done some digging. Found out some interesting things about your bride. Things that might make this marriage invalid." Clara stiffened beside Jack. He felt her fear, and his anger grew hot. "Careful, Hannigan. You're on my land making accusations." "Not accusations, facts." Pete pulled a paper from his pocket. "I have here a testimony from Martin Henderson's cousin. Says Clara here murdered Martin. Hit him with a shovel, let him bleed and die without calling a doctor." The world seemed to stop. Jack felt Clara's hand grip his arm, her fingers digging in hard. Carlos swore softly. The ranch hands shifted uncomfortably. "That's a lie," Clara said, her voice cutting through the tension. "Martin died of infection from an accidental fall. That's not what family says. They want justice. And a murderess can't inherit property or enter into legal contracts, including marriage." Pete's smile widened. "I'm taking this to the marshal. Your marriage will be annulled. I win the bet. And, Clara, here goes to trial for murder." Jack's mind raced. If this went to court, Clara's past would come out. The abuse, the imprisonment. Even if she was acquitted, her life would be destroyed. The town would tear her apart. And Pete would get what he wanted. "No," Jack said firmly. "You're not taking this anywhere." Pete's hand moved toward his gun. His men tensed. Carlos and the hands raised their rifles. The situation was seconds from bloodshed. Then Clara stepped forward, releasing Jack's arm. She walked straight toward Pete Hannigan, fearless, her eyes blazing. "You want the truth, Pete? Here it is." Her voice rang out, clear and strong. "Martin Henderson beat me, starved me, locked me in a cellar like an animal. When I finally fought back, he fell and cut himself. I didn't call the doctor because I was locked in that cellar for 2 more days before I could break out. By the time I got free, the infection was too far gone. Martin's pride killed him, not me." The silence was deafening. Pete's smile faltered. Clara turned slowly, addressing all the men. "You want to take me to trial? Do it. I'll tell that story to a jury. I'll show them the scars on my wrists from the ropes. I'll bring witnesses who heard me screaming from that cellar. Martin's own actions will convict him, not me." She turned back to Pete. "But you don't really care about justice, do you? You just want to hurt Jack. You want to destroy anything good in his life because you're a bitter, hateful man who blames others for your father's choices." Pete's face was scarlet. "You don't know anything about my father. I know he raised a son who thinks it's acceptable to terrorize a woman to win a bet. I know he must have been a real piece of work to produce you." Clara's voice was ice. "Now get off this property before I exercise my right to defend my home." She pulled a pistol from her skirt pocket, cocking it with practiced ease. Jack's eyes widened. Where had she gotten that? Pete's men shifted nervously. This wasn't going according to plan. Their leader was being dressed down by a woman half his size, and she was armed. "This isn't over," Pete snarled. "Yes, it is." Jack stepped up beside Clara, his rifle ready. "You've lost, Pete. The bet, the intimidation, all of it. You come on my land again making threats, I'll have you arrested for trespassing and harassment. The marshal's a friend of mine. He'll listen." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Pete spat in the dirt and swung back onto his horse. "You'll both regret this." They rode off hard, leaving chaos in their wake. As soon as they disappeared over the ridge, Clara's knees buckled. Jack caught her, the pistol clattering to the porch. She was shaking, adrenaline and fear finally catching up. "I've got you," Jack murmured. "You're safe. I've got you." Carlos dismissed the hands quietly. Jack carried Clara inside, setting her gently on the sofa. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I didn't mean for everyone to know." "I didn't want. You saved us both," Jack said firmly. "Clara, you were magnificent. Terrifying, but magnificent. He'll come back. Men like Pete always come back." "Then we'll be ready." Jack took her hands. "But you're not alone anymore. You understand? Whatever happens, we face it together." She looked at him through her tears, searching his face for truth. Whatever she saw there made her nod slowly. "Together," she repeated softly. Outside, the sun was setting over the ranch. Inside, 2 people who'd married as strangers began to understand they might become something more. But the threat of Pete Hannigan hung over them like a coming storm, and they both knew the real battle was just beginning. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Marshal Tucker arrived with Reverend Davies and a woman Jack didn't recognize. Clara met them at the door, her composure fully restored, though Jack noticed her hand trembled slightly as she poured coffee. "Mrs. Morrison," the marshal began carefully, "I've had complaints filed against you. Serious ones. I need to hear your side." The woman spoke up. "I'm Helen Carter. I was Martin Henderson's neighbor. I have testimony to give." Jack's stomach dropped. Another one of Pete's pawns. But Helen's expression wasn't hostile. It was sad, almost apologetic. "Go ahead," Clara said quietly. Helen set down her cup. "I heard you screaming. 3 separate times over 2 years. Once I went to check and Martin told me you were hysterical, that you had female troubles. I believed him, because that's what women did back then. We believed our men." She paused, her voice breaking. "But I knew. Deep down I knew something was wrong. I just didn't have the courage to help you." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Helen, after Martin died, I cleaned out your old house for the bank. I found the cellar, the rope marks on the support beam, the scratches on the door where you tried to claw your way out." Helen was crying now, too. "I should have helped you." "I'm so sorry." Marshal Tucker cleared his throat. "Pete Hannigan came to me yesterday claiming Clara murdered her husband, but Helen here came forward this morning with a different story. Said she'd testify in court if needed about what she witnessed. There's more," Reverend Davies added. "I've been speaking with other women in town. Quietly. 3 others have come forward with similar stories about Martin Henderson. His temper, his controlling nature. One saw bruises on Clara's arms at church. Another heard him berating her in public about her appearance." Jack watched Clara's face cycle through emotions. Relief, grief, anger, gratitude. She reached across and squeezed Helen's hand. "Thank you," she whispered.
"You have no idea what this means."
Marshal Tucker stood. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm closing any investigation into your husband's death. The evidence clearly shows self-defense and neglect on his part, not murder on yours. Pete Hannigan won't get his annulment. He tipped his hat. I'm also putting out a warning about him. He's been making threats, hiring rough men. If he causes trouble, I want to know immediately." After they left, Clara sat in stunned silence. Jack busied himself cleaning up the coffee cups, giving her space to process. Finally, she spoke. "I never expected anyone to believe me, to defend me. People aren't all bad. Some just need courage to do the right thing." She laughed bitterly. "Like you? Marrying me on a drunken bet? Yeah, like me, though I'm starting to think that bet was the luckiest stupid thing I ever did." Clara met his eyes. Something shifted between them, a wall beginning to crumble. "Jack Morrison, you're either the best liar I've ever met, or you're actually sincere." "I'm sincere. Terrible at lying, actually. Carlos says I have the worst poker face in the county." This time her laugh was genuine. "Then, how did you end up in that card game?" Whiskey and stubbornness, a dangerous combination. Over the next week, Clara transformed the ranch. She negotiated better prices with suppliers, saved money on household expenses, and started a proper garden that would feed them through winter. The ranch hands began to respect her, especially after she spent a full day helping them repair a damaged fence line without complaint. Jack found himself watching her constantly, the way she moved, efficient and purposeful, the rare smiles that lit up her face, the strength in her hands as she worked. She wasn't conventionally beautiful by the town's standards, but Jack was starting to realize those standards were worthless. Clara was real, capable, fierce. She was beautiful in ways that mattered. One evening they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Clara had taken to joining him there after dinner, and Jack had begun to crave these quiet moments together. "Tell me about your family," Clara said suddenly. "You never mention them." Jack sighed. "Not much to tell. Ma died when I was 12. Pa raised me hard, taught me ranching, then drank himself to death when I was 20. I've been alone here ever since. No siblings. Had a sister, Lily. She married young, moved east. We write sometimes, but it's been years since I've seen her." He paused. "What about you?" "Only child. Pa was a farmer. Ma took in sewing. They were good people, but poor. Martin seemed like a good match at first. He had land, ambition. I thought I was lucky." She pulled her shawl tighter. "Funny how wrong you can be about a person." "You weren't wrong. He lied about who he was. Maybe, or maybe I saw what I wanted to see." Clara turned to him. "What do you see when you look at me, Jack?" The question caught him off guard. He considered lying, giving a safe answer. But Clara deserved truth. I see strength, courage, a woman who survived hell and came out fighting. I see someone who's smart with numbers, brilliant in the kitchen, and can stare down armed men without flinching. He paused. I see someone I'm proud to call my wife, even if we got here in the most backwards way possible. Clara's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You're making it very hard to keep my walls up, Jack Morrison. Good, because I'm tired of sleeping with a canyon between us. She laughed softly. It has gotten a bit ridiculous, hasn't it? We're married but acting like frightened children. That night they went to bed differently. Not with passion or proclamations, but with a simple shift. Clara's side moved a few inches closer. Jack's hand found hers in the darkness. They fell asleep touching, a bridge forming across the divide. Pete Hannigan struck 3 days later. Jack was checking the northern fence line when he heard gunshots. He spurred his horse back toward the ranch house, his heart pounding. Carlos met him halfway, his face grim. They hit the barn, set fire to the hay storage. We got it under control, but, boss, they took Clara. The world tilted. What? She was gathering eggs. 3 men grabbed her, rode off fast. Danny tried to stop them, got knocked cold for his trouble. Carlos's voice was urgent. They left this. He handed Jack a note. The writing was crude, but the message clear. Come alone to the old Miller place at sunset. Bring the deed to your ranch. Trade for your wife. Jack's hands shook with rage. Get the men together. All of them. Armed. Boss, the note says, come alone. I don't care what the note says. Pete Hannigan took my wife. He's not getting anything but justice. Jack checked his rifle, his mind racing with fear and fury. We end this today. The old Miller place was an abandoned homestead 5 miles north, all collapsed structures and dead trees. Jack approached carefully, the sun sinking toward the horizon. His men were positioned in the surrounding hills, out of sight but ready. Pete stood in the clearing with Clara. She was bound and gagged, but her eyes were blazing with anger. 5 armed men surrounded them. Pete smiled when he saw Jack. Glad you could make it, Morrison. Got the deed? Let her go first. That's not how this works. Deed first, then your wife. Jack dismounted slowly, his hand near his gun. This is kidnapping, Pete. The marshal will hang you for this. The marshal won't find any evidence. You'll sign over your ranch to pay your debts. Clara will unfortunately die in a tragic accident, and I'll finally have what should have been mine all along. Pete pulled out a pistol, pointing it at Clara's head. Now the deed, or I paint the ground with her brains. Clara's eyes found Jack's. Even gagged, even bound, she was trying to communicate something. Her gaze flicked left, then back to him. She was telling him something, warning him. Jack's mind raced. Then he understood. There were more men. Pete had backup hidden in the old barn structure to the left. This was a complete setup. Even if Jack gave up the deed, they'd both die here. Time slowed. Jack made his choice. He dropped to the ground and rolled, drawing his pistol as Carlos and the ranch hands opened fire from the hills. The clearing erupted in chaos. Pete's hidden men emerged from the barn, but they were caught in crossfire. Jack fired twice, hitting the man closest to Clara. She threw herself backward, rolling away from Pete. Pete swung his pistol toward Jack, but a rifle shot from the hills caught him in the shoulder. He dropped, screaming. His men scattered, some firing wildly, others running for their horses. The fight was over in less than a minute. Jack ran to Clara, cutting her bonds with his knife. She tore the gag away, gasping. Are you hurt? He demanded. Jack, behind you! He spun. Pete had retrieved his gun with his good hand, raising it with murderous intent. Jack's pistol was empty. Time seemed to freeze. Then Clara's hand shot out, grabbing a rock from the ground. She threw it with vicious accuracy. It struck Pete's temple with a sickening crack. He dropped like a stone. Marshal Tucker and his deputies arrived minutes later, summoned by Carlos before the confrontation. They found Pete Hannigan unconscious, his men either captured or fleeing, and clear evidence of kidnapping and arson. It was over. On the ride home, Clara sat in front of Jack on his horse, leaning back against his chest. Neither spoke. Words seemed inadequate. When they reached the ranch, Jack helped her down gently. You saved my life, he said quietly. Again, we saved each other. She touched his face, her hand gentle. That's what partners do. Is that what we are? Partners? Clara smiled, truly smiled, for the first time since he'd met her. I think we might be more than that, Jack Morrison, if you're willing. He kissed her then, soft and careful. She kissed him back, her arms wrapping around his neck. When they finally pulled apart, both were crying and laughing at the same time. "We started this all wrong," Jack said. "Bet, contract, necessity. Can we start over?" "No," Clara said firmly. "We can't erase how we got here, but we can choose where we go from here." He took his hand, and I choose to stay, to build something real. If you'll have me. Clara Morrison, I'd be honored. They walked into the house together, truly together, for the first time. The ranch hands cheered from the bunkhouse. Carlos wiped his eyes and pretended it was dust, and two people who'd married as strangers began their life as something far more precious. Part 5, the trial of Pete Hannigan, became the biggest event the county had seen in years. He faced charges of kidnapping, arson, attempted murder, and conspiracy. The courtroom was packed daily with spectators eager for drama. Clara sat beside Jack throughout, her hand firmly in his, facing down the stairs and whispers with quiet dignity. Pete's lawyer tried to paint Clara as a manipulative woman who'd seduced Jack for his money, who'd murdered her first husband and now orchestrated Pete's downfall, but Helen Carter's testimony destroyed that narrative. She brought 3 other women with her, all neighbors who'd witnessed Martin Henderson's abuse. The doctor who'd treated Martin's final infection testified about suspicious injuries that suggested restraint and struggle. Then Clara took the stand. Jack had tried to prepare her, but nothing could really ready someone for that ordeal. She sat straight, her voice clear, and told her story, every painful detail. The cellar, the starvation, the mockery and control, the desperate act of self-defense that led to Martin's death. The courtroom was silent when she finished. Even Pete's lawyer seemed shaken. The judge called a recess, and when they returned, there was a different energy in the room. Sympathy had shifted entirely to Clara. Pete was convicted on all counts, 20 years in the territorial prison. As they led him away, he locked eyes with Jack one final time. The hatred there was pure and burning, but it was impotent now. Pete Hannigan's reign of terror was over. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. Clara handled them with grace, answering questions honestly but briefly. Jack was proud of her strength, the way she refused to be ashamed of her survival. By evening they were home, exhausted but relieved. "It's really over," Clara said, sitting on the porch steps as the sun set. "I keep waiting for something else to go wrong. Nothing's going wrong. We're safe. We won." Jack sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him naturally now, the careful distance between them long gone. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "We live. We build. We figure out this marriage day by day." He kissed the top of her head. "We let ourselves be happy." The months that followed brought transformation. Clara's garden flourished, providing vegetables that saved them significant money. She renegotiated contracts with buyers, getting better prices for their cattle. The ranch prospered under their combined management, Jack handling the livestock and land while Clara managed the business and household with brilliant efficiency. The town's attitude shifted slowly. At first people whispered and judged, but Clara's competence and dignity gradually won them over. When she organized a community fundraiser for the church repairs, contributing both money and labor, opinions began to change. When she helped deliver a neighbor's baby during a difficult birth, drawing on knowledge from her own lost pregnancy, respect started to replace mockery. Jack watched his wife blossom. Away from abuse and control, Clara became more confident, more vibrant. She laughed more easily, smiled more often. The weight that had drawn such cruel comments began to settle differently on her frame as she built muscle from ranch work. But more importantly, she stopped hiding. She wore dresses that fit well, colors that pleased her, stopped apologizing for existing in her own body. One evening, 6 months into their marriage, they hosted a dinner for Carlos and his new wife, Elena. Elena was from Mexico, spoke little English, but had fallen hard for the foreman. Clara spent weeks learning Spanish phrases to make her comfortable. The dinner was warm and full of laughter, the house feeling alive in ways it never had when Jack lived alone. After they left, Clara and Jack cleaned up together, a comfortable routine they'd developed. She washed, he dried. Their hands touched frequently, casually intimate. "Elena told me something interesting today," Clara said, scrubbing a plate. "She's pregnant." Jack nearly dropped the dish he was drying. "That's wonderful. Carlos will be thrilled." "He doesn't know yet. She's scared to tell him." Clara handed him the plate, her expression thoughtful. "She asked me about being a mother, if I wanted children." Jack's heart began to pound. They'd never discussed this. "What did you tell her?" "I told her I lost a baby once. That Martin made me feel like it was my fault, that my body was wrong." Clara's voice was steady but sad. But I also told her that with the right partner, I think I'd like to try again. Clara... Jack set down the towel, turning to face her fully. Are you saying... I'm saying I want a real marriage with you, Jack. All of it. The partnership, the intimacy, the possibility of a family. She met his eyes, vulnerable but brave. If you want that too. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply. I want everything with you. I want to wake up next to you for the rest of my life. I want to build something permanent, something real. I want to deserve you. You already do, she whispered against his lips. You chose to protect me when you could have walked away. You stood by me through the trial. You've been patient and kind and honest. You've given me safety to heal. That night, they made love for the first time. It was tentative and gentle, both of them nervous, both carrying scars from the past. But it was also beautiful, a conscious choice to be vulnerable with each other. Afterward, Clara cried, and Jack held her, understanding that these were tears of release, of finally being safe enough to let go. I love you, she said into the darkness. I didn't think I could love anyone again, but I love you, Jack Morrison. I love you too, he replied, his voice rough with emotion. God help me, I think I started falling the moment you pointed that pistol at Pete Hannigan. She laughed through her tears. That's a strange moment to fall in love. That's when I saw who you really were. Fearless. Magnificent. Mine. The seasons turned. Fall brought harvest, winter brought planning for spring. Clara did get pregnant, a careful joy they'd barely dared speak aloud at first. When she started showing, Jack became impossibly protective, fussing over her constantly until she threatened to lock him in the cellar. That's not funny, he'd protested. It's a little funny, she'd countered. Besides, I'm pregnant, not made of glass. I can still work. The baby, a girl they named Rose, arrived in early spring. Her birth was difficult but successful, and when Jack held his daughter for the first time, tears streaming down his weathered face, Clara knew they'd finally built something that couldn't be broken. Not by gossip, not by Pete Hannigan's bitterness, not by their painful pasts. They were a family. Helen Carter became Rose's godmother, her testimony having cemented a deep friendship with Clara. Elena's son was born 2 months later, and the ranch became a place of children's laughter and chaos. Carlos built a swing near the house, and often in the evenings Jack would push Rose while Clara sat on the porch, watching and smiling. Pete Hannigan died in prison 5 years later. They got the news by telegram. Clara felt nothing but relief. That chapter of their lives was finally, truly closed. On their 6th anniversary, Jack took Clara back to the spot where they'd first kissed after her rescue. The old Miller place had been torn down, the land purchased by a young family starting fresh, new life replacing old pain. Do you ever regret it? Jack asked, holding her close. The way we started? Clara thought for a moment. No, because every hard thing brought us here. Would I have chosen an easier path if I could? Maybe. But this is our story, Jack. The bet, the contract, the fear, the trust we built piece by piece, it's ours. I'm the luckiest fool in the world, Jack said. Yes, you are. Clara grinned up at him. But you're my fool, and I wouldn't have it any other way. They rode home together as the sun set, two people who'd found each other in the darkest circumstances and built something bright. The ranch spread before them, prosperous and peaceful. Smoke rose from the chimney where dinner was warming. Rose would be waiting with Carlos and Elena, probably covered in dirt from helping in the garden. It wasn't the fairy tale either of them had imagined as children. It was better, because it was real. Built on honesty, respect, and the kind of love that grows when two people choose each other every day, through fear and joy, through past pain and present happiness. The lonely rancher had wed the young widow for a bet, but somewhere in the chaos and danger, in the quiet moments and the desperate ones, they'd become something neither expected. They'd become partners, lovers, best friends. They'd become home for each other. And that, Clara thought as they reached the house and Rose came running to greet them, was the best bet Jack Morrison had ever made.